What's up guys, Steve from Exclusive Wraps here. Today we're going to show you how to install a flow kit on the Cerato GT Sedan pre-facelift. Alrighty, so the tools you're going to need to install the rear spats and winglets are a drill, an 8mm drill bit, flathead screwdriver, a 4mm Torx bit or a 4mm Allen key, and a 10mm ratchet spanner. You can also use a 10mm socket, but this is going to make your life a lot easier. First things first guys, you need to take your flat screwdriver and pry off this little trim clip underneath the bumper. Whoop. Don't lose it. That's going to allow you to move this little piece of plastic trim out. You can probably even pop it out. There's also two clips here that you'll find poking through the holes up the very top here. You can just wedge your screwdriver in and pop those out. Next up, grab your rear spat and place it underneath the bumper. You're going to want to line it up with the little notch cut out at the back here. Then the trim is going to follow that body line that you can see under the car there, and you're following it around to the front piece here that's going to line up with those body lines on the bumper. Once you've got that in the correct spot, take your trusty pencil or texter or whatever you've got handy and mark the locations of those holes. Take your 8mm drill bit in your drill and put some pilot holes in. Next up, you want to break open your bag of nuts, bolts and washers. Flow has created some beautiful new fasteners. They are black fittings, which look really nice. They're a lot less obvious under the car as well. You're going to need 4 of these per side, just making up our little washer nut and bolt sandwiches. There we go. Now, if you've optioned the additional winglets, you're going to need to install them at the same time. As you can see, 3 of these holes line up with 3 of those holes. They're going to go underneath like that. First thing you're going to want to do, take one of your nut and washer combos. I'd recommend starting at the end one here, because that's the only one that doesn't include the winglet, and get this one in place. All right, now that that's in place, that's going to hold itself up there. Take your winglet and put the rest of these washers and nuts and bolts in place. It's always a good idea to not tighten any of these up to begin with. You just want to do them finger tight so you have plenty of adjustment when it comes to selecting how wide you want your winglets to sit and making sure that the rear spat sits nicely as well. Righty, lastly, take your 10mm ratchet spanner and your 4mm Allen key or Allen screwdriver, whatever you want to call it, and tighten those up. I'm not going to tighten them all the way, I'm going to do them most of the way just to allow a little bit of adjustment before we do the final tighten. Now, if you come up here, we have plenty of adjustment in there. You can go fully out, fully in, or somewhere in between, which is what we're going to do on this one. Or fully sick. Don't forget to tighten up your bolts once you've decided on the level of adjustment you want. Then you can reinstall the trim that you took out, and you're done. Next up, we're going to install the rear flow lock diffuser. All right, so what you're going to need to install the rear diffuser is your 8mm drill bit, 10mm ratchet spanner, 4mm Allen key or Torx bit, a pencil or texter, flat screwdriver, and a 10mm socket on an extension. All right, first thing we're going to do is remove these 4 clips that hold the under tray onto the rear bumper. Next, you're going to want to take your 10mm socket and undo the 2 bolts that hold the remainder of the under tray in place. Lastly, you need to undo this screw-on, it's not really a bolt, it's like a plastic bolt, I think it's like a 13 or 14 mil, but should be loose enough that it is just undoable by hand. And this should release the under tray. Next, we're gonna attach the flow lock fins onto the diffuser. Take note, all of the fins are labeled from R1 to R4 and L1 to L4. Make sure you put them in the correct spot because they are a little bit difficult to remove if you do get them in place. You may find that some of these fins are quite tight fitting, so it's a good idea to get a piece of cardboard or a towel, something on the ground, and you can install them pushing down into the floor. Next up, you're going to take your flow lock diffuser and align the back edge with this edge of your bumper. So you can see underneath there's a solid line there. And if you look closely up the top here, the tips of the fins are going to sit just a little bit below that red line. So whilst you've got your diffuser in place, either get a friend or if you can free up one of your hands, mark those holes and mark those hole positions and drill your pilot holes. Oh, the rust. Whatever will we do? Oh, rust. Oh my God, your car is slow now. It doesn't even do anything. Lastly, take your nut and bolt and washer combos and bolt them in place. And then finally, we reinstall the rear diffuser. And that's how you install the rear diffuser, rear spats and winglets. All right guys, next up we're going to install the side skirts on the Cerato GT Sedan. What you're going to need, 6.5mm drill bit, a 9mm drill bit, your 4mm Allen key or Torx screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, ideally on a right angle will be very helpful, and one Phillips head drill bit as well to help you pull out some old factory screws. Let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your Phillips head drill bit or a screwdriver and remove all of the factory Phillips head screws underneath. It's also helpful to remove this screw from the front of the skirt.
Oh, yeah.
For the next part, it's helpful if you have a friend or at least a couple of jack stands handy. We're going to put the side skirt in place, lining it up with the pre-cut holes and that line up with the underside of the side skirt, and we're going to pre-drill our holes. So you want to take your 6.5mm drill bit and ideally drill this front hole first. That way you'll be able to put in the first bolt and this isn't going to move around on you when you drill the rest of your holes. Now guys, this is the fiddly part. You can install this without removing the side skirt. It just requires you to flex this skirt down a fair bit, and you're going to have to get your hands in to the small gap up there and tighten this nut onto the bolt. All right. Next up, we're going to drill the end hole with our 6.5mm bit. We're going to lower the skirt out of the way and swap in the 9mm drill bit, which doesn't actually fit very well in that hole there. You don't want to round that out or take any material off. That's going to make way for the Chicago bolt, which is going to go in the end hole. So it's going to come through your side skirt and down into the splitter, and you're going to use one of the small bolts that come with the kit to fasten that in place. Now that we've got the front and rear bolts in place, we can go ahead and drill all of the remaining holes using our 6.5mm drill bit, and then take our nut and bolt washer combos and fasten them underneath. Once you've got all your nuts and bolts installed, you can put the standard Phillips head screws back on the underside of the side skirt and the one that you would have taken out from behind the front wheel. One thing to note guys, underneath your side skirt is full of this sort of self-adhesive foam in between the skirt and the body of the car. When you drill your holes for the nuts and bolts, some of them are going to hit some of this foam and it's going to make it a little bit tricky for you to get that nut and bolt in there. So what you're going to want to do is reach in there first, feel around for the foam and just pull away a little bit that's in the area where that hole you've drilled is. That's going to make installing the nuts and bolts a lot easier. And lastly guys, if you option the side winglets, all you need is your two bolts and washers, and they will go into the threaded inserts in your skirt. Again, you can adjust how far out or in these winglets sit. Alrighty guys, we're going to install the Flow Designs front splitter, extensions and winglets onto the Cerato. The tools we're going to need for this install are your 8mm drill bit, a flathead screwdriver, your 4mm Allen key or Torx bit, 10mm ratchet spanner or a socket, and trusty pencil. And some clamps are also going to help. First things first, we want to remove the under tray from the underside of the bumper. Take your flathead screwdriver and remove a bunch of push clips along the front and down the sides, and then you've got a few 10mm bolts running along underneath and towards the back. Next, you want to take your splitter, grab some clamps or a friend, and clamp it in place. With the splitter clamped in place, we can now pre-drill all of our holes. Now we can take the supplied brackets and install them over this crash bar here, making sure that they sit in line with the 4 center holes of the splitter. Yeah. So the 4 long bolts go into the brackets in the center. The 2 smaller ones will go on the outer holes, and then the 4 remaining bolts will go into the remaining holes. Now that the main splitter is installed, we can go ahead and install the optional extensions and winglets. We're going to start with the extension, making sure that you take the supplied Chicago bolt and slide that into the recessed hole in the splitter. If you install the first of the bolts into one of the gold threaded inserts, that way it's going to free up your other hand to hold that Chicago bolt in place. Remember not to tighten up any of these bolts too tight, because that's going to allow you to adjust how far out your extensions and winglets sit. Now, if you're installing only the extensions without the winglets, you can go ahead and use all of the small supplied bolts. If you're installing the winglet as well, you're going to need to use the longer bolts because there's more material in between the bolt and the thread. Once you've got all your bolts loosely in place, you can adjust how far in or out the extensions and winglets sit. Finally, you can reinstall your under tray, clips and 10mm bolts, and you're done. And that's how you install the front splitter, extensions and winglets.